My name is David, and I have been tasked by my wife to write my story and explain how everything happened. She has said she might also write about how this unfolded from her own perspective, but that remains to be seen. This is a rather painful story, and it has been just over a year since all of this took place. I haven't fully adjusted to my new reality yet, and I'm not sure I ever will. For those of you who don't know what a cuck is, it refers to a man who allows his wife to be intimate with other men. Often, it also involves the husband being humiliated by both his wife and her lovers. We met when I was 26 and she was 23 years old. We had just finished college, I was a newly graduated engineer, and she was a nurse. We are now 37 and 34 years old. We got married the following year. The first 4 years of our relationship, we worked extremely hard to establish a solid foundation for our future. We worked as much as we could, both gaining more responsibilities and promotions in our jobs. Everything was perfect. We managed to save a healthy amount of money and bought a house after 4 years. At that time, I was a mid-level manager with a good salary, and my wife was a specialized nurse with supervisory responsibilities. Everything was perfect. We were ready to start a family. We tried for over a year before getting fertility tests. These revealed that I was unable to have children. My world fell apart. Of all the things I had planned for that could go wrong, this was not one of them. It was incomprehensible and I broke down. The same was true for my wife, Sophie. Her greatest wish to become a mother was crushed overnight. There was a lot of anger toward me. She knew it wasn't fair to blame or accuse me, but she couldn't help it. It took nearly 6 months for us to recover, requiring a lot of effort from both of us, including therapy. I was, of course, worried about losing her in the midst of all this. She claims it was never close to happening, but I believe it was very close. Once our lives regained some sense of normalcy, it was still not the same. Our sex life fluctuated dramatically, sometimes to the point of being almost non-existent, maybe once a month. Often, it was she who rejected me. I tried to do more housework, show her I loved her, take her on dates, and plan activities. But when we were in a low period, nothing seemed to help. Eventually, things would return to normal. But even during normal times, it wasn't particularly frequent, maybe once a week. Before all this, the norm was 3 to 4 times a week. The new normal was entirely different from before. There were other things, too, like how she sometimes chose to spend time alone instead of with me. This hurt, and at times, I felt like I was on the verge of losing her again. However, about a year ago, her attitude toward me changed dramatically. She became affectionate, took the initiative, and wanted to spend time with me, just like before. Our sex life became incredible. She was curious, wanted to try new things, and wanted to be intimate often, sometimes even more than when we first met all those years ago. I was ecstatic. I saw no problem with it, only positives. I chose to believe that her stress and trauma from not being able to become a mother had subsided and that she now wanted to live her life to the fullest. Looking back on that period now, in light of what came to light later, I've thought about it a lot. She became more secretive with her phone, smiled more while looking at it, texted more, and worked late more often. While none of this was entirely unusual before, it was now on a whole new level. Every time she worked late, she was eager to be intimate as soon as she walked through the door at home. Regardless of the time of night, she would wake me if I was asleep. The time didn't matter. She wanted me as soon as she got home. I thought it was amazing and took it as her trying to make up for her late nights. But now, I know better. The first suspicion that something was wrong came when I saw a conversation on Messenger. She had left her computer on, and I happened to pass by it. I glanced at the screen and saw that she had sent heart emojis to someone. I checked, and someone named Robert had received them. I had no idea who this was. The conversation wasn't long. It simply said, "Thanks for last night." Her response was a heart. It was a shock to me because she had supposedly been at work until 3 in the morning the night before. What had she been doing if not at work? Adrenaline surged through me and I started shaking. My heart was racing. I felt nauseous, and it took me hours to calm down. I began replaying all the events of the past few weeks in my mind and started seeing certain warning signs. The smiles at her phone, the newfound curiosity in the bedroom, and her complete turnaround in how she treated me. She had woken me the night before and been completely wild, just as she often had been. I always woke up with a smile after those nights, but now I didn't know what to feel. Did she despise me? Was she enjoying being with someone else and then coming to me as if to humiliate me in secret? The only thing I knew was that I needed to find out what was going on. So I decided to try to stay calm and gather more information. Now I knew I had to be on guard. I spent hours searching online. I found AOR surviving infidelity on Reddit and read everything I could find. In almost all cases of infidelity, the cheating partner distanced themselves from their spouse, becoming cold and indifferent. But Sophie hadn't been like that with me. Perhaps there was still hope? That evening when she came home, she was her usual self. I asked her if she would be working late anytime soon, but she shook her head and smiled brightly at me. She told me she'd be home with me and suggested we plan something for the weekend. I couldn't find any red flags that evening. She didn't even use her phone much. My emotions were almost out of control and I tried hard to stay calm, but I was angry and sad. Yet, I didn't know anything for certain. I couldn't assume she was cheating, so I really tried to stay composed. By 9 in the evening, though, I couldn't take it anymore. I told her I had a headache and went to bed early. She looked disappointed but hugged me and kissed me goodnight. I lay there tossing and turning for at least 2 hours. Eventually, I heard her approaching the bedroom. I pretended to be asleep. She climbed into bed, wrapped her arms around me, and then fell asleep. That almost made me cry. If she was really doing what I suspected, how could she show so much affection toward me at the same time? I couldn't understand it. No, it took me hours to fall asleep, and I could feel her lying there, breathing against my back. In the morning, she got up before me, which I made sure of. I heard her enter the shower, where she spent 30 minutes, then came out and started dressing for work. I lay under the covers but peeked out to see what she was doing. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. She put on socks and then the pants she usually wore. But she didn't put on any underwear. That was the proof I needed. Not even when we were dating did she do that. My courage sank, and I lay there, unable to move. When she left for work, I finally managed to get up. I didn't know what to do. How could she go behind my back like this? She was the love of my life. Could I handle divorcing her? I didn't think so. Our life is amazing otherwise. Should I throw it all away because of this, when I feel like I have her full attention in every other way? I couldn't find any fault in our relationship. It was perfect. Yesterday had made that abundantly clear. I didn't know how long I sat there in bed, thinking about my wonderful wife and our perfect life. On Reddit, people always advise those who are betrayed to divorce or end the relationship. But I was almost certain I wouldn't be able to live without her. How would it affect my mental health? I didn't know. The coming days would have to show. D-Day, as they call it, was the worst day of my life, without a doubt. It felt like it lasted an eternity. I decided to confront her when she came home. I prepared for the conversation all day. I called in sick to work, sat down with paper, pen, and a laptop. I searched online for similar situations and wrote down relevant questions. I categorized them and arranged them on a timeline, what to ask and when to ask it during the conversation. For example, some questions couldn't be asked too early, as I might not have enough information to put them into context. I felt reasonably ready for the conversation. When she came home in the evening, she was her usual self, happy, warm, and affectionate. She hugged and kissed me when she walked in, asked what we should eat, and suggested ordering pizza. I said that sounded good. Then something happened while we were eating. She became serious and unusually focused. It was as if she was analyzing every detail about me to reach some sort of decision. Then she said the words that anyone in a relationship fears. We need to talk. All I could think was that it was over. She was going to tell me she wanted a divorce. I froze, and I think she noticed because her demeanor changed too. She became hesitant and looked as though she might start crying. All I could say was, "Just say it." She looked at me for a long time and then said, "I've been unfaithful with a man from work." I stared at her, completely stunned, unable to utter a word. But my expression must have been awful because she looked utterly distraught. I asked her how long it had been going on. She said about 5 weeks. which matched when our relationship had started to improve, when everything had become so wonderful. Since she was telling me this voluntarily, I thought her story was probably more truthful than if I had forced a confession out of her. I was silent for so long that she asked me to say something. I was so deep in thought that I had almost forgotten she was there. I stared down at my pizza. My next question was, why? She said her boss, Robert, had noticed she wasn't feeling well and asked her what was wrong. She confided in him, telling him about what we had been through. Over time, their friendship developed into something more. Then I asked a few quick questions, which she answered promptly. Me. Do you want a divorce? Her. No. Me. Do you love him? Her. No, not the way I love you. Me. If I ask you to stop seeing him, will you? Her. No. That last answer came after hesitation. This was the start of a very long conversation. It was so long that it can't all be included here. This post would become hundreds of pages. I'll try to provide a summary. Apparently, her feelings had developed slowly. Robert was the head of her department, a senior doctor. He was 45 years old and divorced. When this started between them, he believed I should know what was happening. She also wanted to tell me, but it took time to muster the courage. Her guilt was overwhelming, but she also noticed that her interest in me increased dramatically while their affair was ongoing, both in the bedroom and outside of it. She felt alive, seen, sexy, and desirable because of her boss, and it spilled over into our relationship. I asked why she always came home to me and insisted on being with me immediately after being with him. She fell silent, began mumbling, and didn't really answer the question. I started to get upset. The least I could demand from her now was honesty. I told her I thought it was extremely disrespectful of her to do that. Eventually, it came out that she simply enjoyed it. Being with two men back-to-back excited her, and she liked that I was number two. She understood that I found it disrespectful and borderline degrading, but that only made it more thrilling for her. I've divided this into multiple parts so it doesn't get too long. I'll try to release part 2 soon. Thank you for listening this far.
If you liked this story, please subscribe and give us a thumbs up. It helps a lot, and you won't miss out on any future stories. Take care and live your best life.